All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome into the Rocky Top Insider postgame show. This is Ryan Schumpert. I am Rick Butler, standing here in Ohio Stadium as Tennessee's season comes to a close in the first round of the college football playoffs by a score of 42-17. Ryan, Ohio State beat Tennessee down in the first quarter. They sort of made a little bit of a comeback towards the end of the second quarter, but Ohio State once again staved off that and then just sort of torched Tennessee for the rest of the game. As we sit here on the field, what are you thinking about? What's kind of going through your head just about why this game got so lopsided for Tennessee?
Yeah, I mean, I just think it was certainly a beatdown to your point, and I think there's a lot of ways you can go with it. I think one, you saw Ohio State play to their potential, which I think everybody talked about all season, how extremely high it was, and how talented this Ohio State team is, and you wondered how they would come out after the Michigan loss, a disappointing loss, and you saw them come out similar to how they did 2 years ago against Georgia
Game.
in the Peach Bowl, where they were kind of reinvigorated and they channeled all that emotion the right way. And I think you saw Tennessee not play well. And some of that is stuff we'd seen this season. I'd say most of it's stuff we'd seen this season. Some of the issues in the secondary, some of the issues just overall defensively were certainly a lot bigger than we've seen at any point in the year. And I guess, the takeaway, I guess, in the macro, kind of combining with the micro, I think you see, I don't think this changes. This was a good season for Tennessee. Tennessee had a good year. I don't think this changes that, but yeah, I think at the same time you see how big the gap is between Tennessee and the top teams in the country right now, just as programs, not just as teams, I guess I should say. And I'm not sure in Josh Heupel's tenure if it's ever felt maybe as wide as it did today.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I don't know if I mentioned the score at the top of it, but it was 42-17, Ohio State over Tennessee. Let's go back to the beginning of the game, and maybe even a little bit more than that, because on this sideline, especially here, but all the way around this horseshoe area, there were Tennessee fans packing the house. There were a ton of Tennessee fans that traveled for this game. Ron, one of the things that we talked about heading into this was that it might be off script a little bit based on what Tennessee's done this year, but they needed to start out hot, not only because there was some questions going around about how are the Ohio State fans going to react? How are the players going to react? Tennessee had, 30,000 people. Let's just call it that. How much could you get into their energy at the beginning of the game? Well, Ohio State came out and put up 21 straight points on the board in relatively easy fashion. I mean, I believe that Tennessee struggled with 3 and outs, or at least close to a 3 and out on their first offensive drive, but Ohio State just continued to put together 5-6 play drives that would go 70 to 80 yards down the field. Tennessee needed to punch Ohio State in the mouth. Instead, Ohio State came out, landed a couple nice punches on Tennessee, and really just threw them off balance for the rest of the game. I mean, I know that, again, we talked about it, Tennessee being able to make a little bit of a push there at the end of the second quarter, maybe have the potential double dip. That obviously did not happen. But, man, Ohio State came out swinging, and Tennessee just got rattled. They took some of those shots to the chin.
For sure, and I think, it's important.
And the fans, because of that, the fans kind of died down. And not to say anything bad about, the fan base. This is a tough game to sit through. But you really needed it at the beginning to get the juices flowing.
Yeah, I don't know if I necessarily agree with it from the Tennessee fan standpoint. Like, you're right, they did die down. I don't think that mattered as much. As many Tennessee fans as they were here, I don't think it was going to make third downs hard or anything like that for Ohio State. I think it's twofold, and it is what you said. The fact that if Tennessee could have punched Ohio State early, I think that the way the Ohio State fans would have kind of been responded to that could have been a big negative. And then just on the other end, Tennessee's just not really a team built to play from behind, especially against a defense like Ohio State's. And so that was a big part of it. And I think, certainly that's a huge, huge story of the game. But at the same time, this game was so lopsided that, even you mentioned the second half. You mentioned the second half run for Tennessee, or the second quarter push from Tennessee.
Yeah, and push I use.
Yeah, no, but I mean, I do think that's fair. Like, Tennessee got the ball to start the second half. If they go score a touchdown on that drive, or even score, it's a game. It's a one-score game again. So I do think that's fair. But what I will say is even in that drive, Tennessee has a roughing the passer on an interference that got to him in the field goal range. In a touchdown drive, which was a good drive, but it was 16 plays.
Sure.
No, there was nothing easy for Tennessee's offense. Everything Tennessee's offense had to do, it felt, when things were clicking, which was not often tonight, it felt challenging, it felt strenuous. Whereas to your point earlier, the Ohio State drives 5, 6, 7 plays, chunk plays in the passing game. It did not feel challenging for Ohio State. And I guess I say all that to say, as bad as the start was for Tennessee, and certainly they got punched in the face, and that hurt any chances they had of winning. Um, it wasn't like one of those things where you look back on and you go, the start, that just cost them. They couldn't
Yeah.
overcome the start. And this was just a one-sided game, and Tennessee was not up for the fight tonight.
You talked about some of the explosive plays that Ohio State was able to hit throughout the course of the
Yeah.
game and that Tennessee was not able to. You wrote about this in your 4 takeaways, which I highly recommend going and reading about this. I'm going to draw some great stats from that, but lack of explosive plays, and Tennessee could not stop it. Ohio State's explosive plays. Ohio State had 12 plays worth more than 15 yards. Tennessee had 4. And I think that really showed just as the game continued to go on all 4 quarters.
Yeah, and I think so much of this game was just the same story of the Georgia game.
Sure.
And we talked about that coming in, if that would be concern for Tennessee. And Tennessee's offense, could they create chunk plays with a passing attack that has been really inconsistent all season, has not been good against the best defenses they've played. And it was the same story. I think Tennessee had 1 pass of over 15 yards in the Georgia game. They had 2 today. Longest one was 21 yards.
Yeah.
So no chunk plays. And on the other end, Ohio State's, you knew for Tennessee to win this game, Tennessee's defense line was going to have to dominate, and they were going to have a really good pass rush, and they just didn't tonight. They couldn't get pressure with 4. I think Ohio State schemed up some good stuff with some quick passes for sure too, but Tennessee was not able to take control. And look, Ohio State's receivers are a different level of athlete than what Georgia has, and certainly what Ohio State's offense did to Tennessee's defense was a more dramatic version of what Georgia did. But for Tennessee to win, they were going to have to dominate up front. They were going to have to find a way to create some explosive plays offensively. It was the exact same recipe. I mean, it's just kind of football 101. But it was the exact same recipe against Georgia. It was the exact same recipe tonight. And Tennessee was unsuccessful both times.
Yeah, we talked going into this game, just what was Tennessee's defensive front going to look like. It's what most people in the national media were also talking about, but you knew that that was going to be a strength of Tennessee's team. But in fairness, we talked about in that Georgia game, just what happened when Tennessee wasn't able to get that pass rush, was able to give the opposing quarterback a little bit of time to work in the pocket. You know what? When you give Will Howard a little bit of time to work in the pocket, he's going to dissect you, if you're not careful. And that's exactly what he did. I remember being up here in the box. He threw that 22-yard touchdown over here to Jeremiah Smith. That was a beautiful pass. And you got to give him credit for being able to make that throw. You got to give Jeremiah Smith credit for being able to make that route. But again, it's those chunk plays that hurt Tennessee. It's the lack of pass rush that hurt Tennessee. And sort of these things came together in a cold night here in Columbus.
Yeah, 100%. And, I think with the pass defense, I do think the corners struggled more than you would expect, or more than I expected, I guess, but maybe not shocking given the level of athlete Ohio State has. And you do know that that's a really, really talented group. One number, I think Ohio State, what the math would have been, they scored 6 touchdowns tonight. I think they had, before they went to their backups, which was about 10 minutes left in the fourth quarter, they had 6 total third downs. So it was easy. And we have not seen Tennessee's defense get torched like this all season. It was very, very one-sided. I think on those 6 third downs, they were 4 of 6. 1 of the 2 they didn't get. They went for a 4th down and got it. So Tennessee got 1. Ohio State punted before they went to the backups. They punted 1 time tonight. And obviously an interception in the end zone. But Tennessee just very, very little resistance.
I'll give you another stat on that low number, single-digit stat that people probably aren't going to want to hear about this. But you talk about 6 touchdowns in total for Ohio State. Will Howard, I believe, just had 5 incompletions. Yeah,
and he threw the ball a lot.
Yeah, it wasn't like it was just 12 passes.
Yeah.
It was 5 for 7 and 5 or something like that. I mean, he threw the ball all around the field, throughout the game. They even went to a backup quarterback in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, I mean, I think he attempted over 30 passes. And look, Ohio State, they learned from their mistakes in the Michigan game. They threw the ball a whole lot more than they did in that game. And I thought when they ran the ball, it was almost exclusively counter plays. And I think that's the misdirection is kind of how you've seen some teams exploit Tennessee's run defense. The teams that have had, when teams have had success, not really that many teams have had success running the ball against Tennessee, period. But when teams have had success, it's been a lot of misdirection plays. And Ohio State, that was a clear game plan for them, was to run that and to not just line up and run a lot of inside zone in the middle of Tennessee's defense, which they did a lot in that Michigan game. So absolutely, I think you saw Ohio State have a really good offensive plan coming in. And Tennessee really didn't have a whole lot of adjustments, a whole lot of answers.
One guy that we have not mentioned so far that we probably should talk about a little bit was a big conversation point coming into the game was Tennessee quarterback Nico. He was running for his life out there. And Joey Halsey said it after the game. There weren't a ton of design quarterback runs. Pretty much all that he was doing was escaping the pocket when he had to, being able to create extra, being able to pick up extra yards with his legs on those plays. But man, is he going to be sore when he wakes up on Sunday morning. He took a beating out there. I liked what he did. I liked the toughness that he showed. I know you had some thoughts on some of those runs and things, but a tough effort from the quarterback. Obviously, a tough effort is not going to surpass a massive deficit like this. But give a little bit of credit here at the end of the season.
Yeah, I don't think anybody can doubt Nico's
No.
toughness or his desire or anything like that. And look, I don't think Nico is the biggest problem in the passing game, and I don't think he's been the biggest problem in the passing game all season. But I did think he was a little indecisive, a little happy feet at times, which, you kind of get that with the offensive line issues. Look, this was very similar to what the best defenses Tennessee's played this year. Against top-level defenses, Tennessee's pass protection has been very bad, and that was the case again tonight. So, Nico, I didn't think was great. I don't think he was the biggest problem. Really tough kid, and certainly Tennessee will, promise with Nico going forward for sure.
Tennessee fought through some injuries in this game, and that was a huge story, especially going into halftime. I mean, just going into the halftime break, you wrote about the story on RockyTopInsider.com. Tennessee had Dylan Sampson, who was out. He did, come back and have a couple runs in the second half, but I can't really remember too much.
He caught a pass.
Okay, he caught a pass. That's right. Good save. He caught a pass. He was dealing with something, and
hamstring.
And that actually was spoken about a little bit more in the post-game press conferences. Imagine we'll write about it. Imagine that you can go and find those post-game press conferences right now, get a little bit of insight yourself. But Dante Thornton, gets banged up during the game. Squirrel White gets banged up during the game. You wrote about it. At one point, I believe Tennessee might have even had only 4 scholarship wide receivers out there.
With 4
they
scholarship
finished
receivers.
And 2 of those are true freshmen.
Yep.
Obviously, that's not to say that if Tennessee had those 3 players or had their portal players, that this would have been a different game, that Tennessee would have walked out the victors. But it is a part of the storyline. I mean, Tennessee was banged up. They had to continue to compete with who they had. Nico Iamaleava said it after the game. It's about who's out there on the field. He believes that everyone's capable. Tennessee would have certainly liked to have had their stars, but man, they got banged up pretty quickly in the first half of this game.
Yeah, they did. And then Dylan
Sampson going into the game.
Yeah, I don't think anybody knew about that.
No.
And Heupel and Joey Halsley both talked about it. That it was kind of from into the Vanderbilt game. He really wasn't practicing until I think this week. So he had 2 weeks off after the Vanderbilt game. They practiced this week, and it was like he was going to try to give it a go. But it was pretty. By Tennessee's second series, I don't think he was in the game.
I think you're right.
He would have had to have one other carry at some point. So I think he just had 1 carry on the first series, and then it was a Nico 2 Nico scrambles. But yeah, I mean that's a big blow. It was 42-17 game, like you said. That wasn't the difference, but that's a tough blow for Tennessee's offense, undoubtedly. I mean, it's the SEC Offense Player of the Year. He's carried Tennessee's offense at times, and then it's the receiver aspect. I mean, it's just kind of crazy. Squirrel White and Dante Thornton, I mean, the story of their seasons, especially Squirrels, because Dante's had a lot of big plays, but it's been you can't tell the story of their seasons without talking about the injuries. Both those guys didn't finish. I don't think either of those guys finished the Vanderbilt game 3 weeks ago. I know Thornton didn't. Maybe White did. They don't finish the game tonight. Both get injured in the first half. And, it's crazy. I mean, Tennessee had 4 receivers enter the portal that weren't with the team, and Braylon Staley hadn't played a meaningful snap of football all season, and he's out there almost exclusively the entire second half, which is just crazy. And again, that's obviously and look, I think credit to Josh Heupel, credit to Tennessee's coaches, Tennessee's players in the post game. No excuses tonight. No complaining about the officiating. No complaining about the injuries. They made it pretty simple and owned up to the fact that they just suffered a beatdown. But yeah, I mean that's certainly limited what Tennessee can do.
No doubt about it. That is relatively all the notes I have. What am I missing? What do you kind of want to expand on a little bit more? A little bit of an extended instant reaction down here on the field today.
Yeah, combine the podcast into one. And look, I'm sure we'll talk more about this in a podcast at a later date. But to me, I think one of the biggest takeaways I have come out of this year, I'm going to write about it, is maybe this statement's over dramatic, but to me it feels like Tennessee's passing attack's broken. Again, maybe that's dramatic, but it needs an overhaul. Tennessee was not good all season. It was really, really bad in the 3 games Tennessee lost. It was not good last season. The chunk plays are gone. The explosivity is gone. Tennessee's tempo is gone. And look, I'm no football genius or anything, but so much of what Tennessee does offensively is predicated on the tempo. and the route combinations are not overly sophisticated. All right, we're post. We had a little equipment coming past
You
us,
think
but
this is the ESPN set right here that got
yeah,
broken
that's
down?
plausible. It seems like that could be it, but
We had to move for a forklift. Things
yeah,
happen.
things
Things
happen.
happen.
But Tennessee's passing attack on that in the long term, and the tempo aspect of it, it's like Tennessee's route trees are not very sophisticated. And if you don't have that tempo to kind of throw people off or to have people playing on their heels, and you don't have elite receivers, like it just I think becomes very simple to stop at times. So I'm not a genius. I think there are a lot of issues with Tennessee's passing game, but when I sit here and I leave this stadium, leave this season more than anything, I'm thinking about what does Tennessee have to do to get back here and be better in these type of games. I think the passing attack just has to be radically improved from where it was this season. No explosivity. And again, I think it's a lot of blame to go around. Receivers, offensive line. Nico certainly wasn't great at all times this year. I'm more. I tend to give him a pass a little bit more because
Sure.
he's a young player, and I thought he got better as the season went on.
Did grow a lot.
And I don't think things were great around them. But that's the thing that Tennessee has to fix, and I don't think it's a simple issue. I think it's some of it might be a systematic flaw that Tennessee has right now.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Certainly looking forward to reading more of your thoughts on, that whole conversation in general once it's up on RocketTopInsider.com. But you're right, and that's something that Joey Halsey talked about after the game. They asked him, when some of these passing plays don't go right, what does it look like? And he said, look, you might have elite protection up front, but your receivers don't create separation. Your receivers might create some separation, but you have an overthrow or the protection's not great up front. And certainly those things combined a lot for Tennessee. But as you go through your research and as we continue to talk about it, I'm sure some of those things will stand out to us more than others as we kind of go through and finish that conversation. But no doubt about it, it hindered Tennessee at times this year. And man, certainly there were a lot of factors at play tonight, but that did factor in too.
Yeah, and look again, it's not as simple as anything. I think they needed an upheaval at receiver, and I mean they're going to get some of it. I really don't get why they're not being more aggressive in the portal at this point in the offseason at the receiver position. Look, I mean Chris Brazzell, the experiment this year was a abject failure. He did not have a good season. He did not play at a high level.
Right.
Squirrel White's struggle. I think you can chalk up. You could have a narrative that a lot of that's been to do with the injuries, and that's hurt him. He was pretty good in 2023. And obviously, they're going to lose Brood. They're going to lose Dante Thornton. They're going to lose some guys. But you look at what's coming back in that room. If to me, you're banking on some guys to take major jumps if you don't go out and get some serious talent in the portal to get this passing attack fixed. Because I don't think there's a whole lot of reason to think the offensive line is going to be significantly better next season. When you talk about potential true freshman and David Sanders stepping in, losing 2, maybe 3 starters in the interior. You expect Nico to be better. He's back. He has another year. But receivers, the position that I think you gotta find some answers.
No doubt about it. I think that was that was really well said by you. And again, certainly looking forward to reading that post, which you can go and find whenever it comes out over at RockyTopInsider.com. Anything else you want to get into before we kind of wrap this thing up and head upstairs, get some more work done before heading back home tomorrow?
Yeah, I guess as a closing thought, and I said a little bit of this earlier. I think there is a middle ground to strike of just being a good season and Tennessee getting a lot out of the team that they had and capitalizing on a weaker schedule and a weaker SEC. But this team certainly wasn't perfect, and you make the playoffs, and you're supposed to feel good to make the playoffs, and I think going 10-2 and making the playoffs is good. But after years of this, you're going to see, well, what good is making the playoffs if you don't have any chance to win a national championship?
Right.
Tennessee was a playoff team that had no chance of making a national championship.
Just like Indiana and SMU.
Just like Indiana, just like SMU, just like Clemson.
Yep.
And I think, look, Tennessee goes and plays the format. We've talked about it before, being bad. It put Tennessee in a spot where they had to play a really good Ohio State team.
Yeah.
But even let's say Tennessee. And really even more in the format, because I do think if Tennessee played at home against SMU or Indiana, I think they would have won.
Right.
But let's say Ohio State doesn't lose to Michigan, because that kind of screwed Tennessee too. Tennessee plays Penn State or Notre Dame, and Tennessee loses that game close. It would be a lot easier for people to stomach in the moment. I'm not sure it wouldn't be worse for Tennessee long term, just because I think this loss was so jarring. I think it might make Josh Heupel, the people in the program, really assess assess a lot of the issues that they had, and the difference in getting to the next level.
Yeah, just like what you said. I mean, it wasn't necessarily just a loss tonight. It was a 4-quarter beatdown.
Yeah.
And that might be one of those things where you're right. You acknowledge the accomplishment of being one of the first teams, or being one of the final 12 teams in the first ever 12-team playoff. But man, when you get to this point and it's a 42-17 final, right?
Yeah.
I there's a lot of offseason conversation to be had, and certainly we will be looking forward to all of that conversation with you guys, the fans, hearing what you have to say after this game. So certainly let us know and tell us what you think about just what Tennessee needs to do in the offseason, what you would like to see them do. Again, just like Ryan said, Tennessee finishes the regular season with a 10-2 record, 0-1 in the postseason with a loss in the first round of the college football playoffs to Ohio State, 42-17 right here in Ohio Stadium. Any other thoughts before we close this thing out?
That's all I got.
I mean, I'd imagine that we'll come back soon. Maybe have a season recap podcast.
Yeah.
We'll get Jack Foster back on the show. Like you had alluded to, I don't think there's going to be an immediate RTI Press Pass podcast following this. Just a bit of a time crunch with everything going on here during a late game in Columbus. I mean, I think as we record this right now,
1:30.
It's 1:30 in the morning.
Ooh.
So we only, we are certainly on the clock getting this thing out of here. But one last message to the fans, just thank you very much for everybody who's been listening to us throughout this season. We certainly hope you continue with us for basketball and baseball season coming up. But it's been fun. We've had a lot of fun. We got to go to Arkansas. We got to come here. We got to do some really fun things. So thank you out there for listening to us. Ryan, thank you for a great season, my friend. Man, there's still a lot to talk about with Tennessee football, and we will continue doing that. But until then, why don't we go find a good place to warm up? It is
right.
it is 1:30 in the morning, and it's certainly cold. So with that being said, go ahead and wrap this up. This is Ryan Schumpert. You can follow him at rshump00 on social media. My name is Rick Butler. You can follow me at Rick_Butler. But again, we got a lot of Tennessee football conversation in the offseason. Can't wait for you to be a part of that. Thank you very much for listening to the Rocky Top Insider Instant Reaction Show. We will have you covered through basketball and baseball season. Still a lot coming up for Tennessee athletics. We will have you covered for it all. Thanks again. Have a good night.